been talking about all the great things that happened over the weekend. I caught up with them on the road, actually, because I was touring with Dennis Miller, and we were playing various dates in Western New York and Pennsylvania, in Syracuse and Rochester, and in Reading, Pennsylvania, and the enigmatically enunciated Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre, whatever it is. And we had a great time. Always run into rock bands on the road, and you would be surprised how the conservative inclinations of rockers is always interesting to me. And it's like, because I'm more of an easy listening guy. So it's kind of slightly depressing to me that sometimes, you know, like you go to Broadway and all your show tunes guys, family-friendly show tunes guys, are all big liberals. And then you go meet the debauched rockers, and the debauched rockers have all got these conservative inclinations. It's a very perplexing business to me, that. But it was great being on the road with Dennis Miller, and great to meet so many Rush listeners in the course of those nights. And Dennis is actually going to be with me on this year's Mark Steyn cruise, which you can find out about by going to marksteincruise.com. We're going from Vancouver to Alaska. So we're going up, whatever you call it, up the Alaska coast to, I think they call it the Inside Passage, and then to Skagway and Glacier Bay and Ketchikan and all that, going up there and then coming back down the Alaska coast to Vancouver. But you can find out about that at marksteincruise.com. Apart from Dennis, Michelle Bachman is also going to be on there. And Michelle is a very convivial cruiser, because she's not just providing top-notch political analysis, but she's also quite happy to join in on all the classic pop sing-alongs later in the evening. So if you ever want to hear Michelle Bachman singing "Taking Care of Business," because Michelle's the one they should have put in Bachman Turner Overdrive, or you ain't heard nothing yet, then come and join us on the Mark Steyn cruise. marksteincruise.com is the place to go for that. Or I think you can link to it if you go to steynonline.com as well. That's Steyn with a Y. Eventually, everything comes round to the president's position. The whole thing about the Trump announcement of his candidacy, what did it for him? What set his candidacy alight? It was nothing in the script. It was nothing in the script. It was when he went off script and added that when Mexico isn't sending its best, a lot of the people they're sending are rapists. And everyone, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that. And in fact, it was the line that set his candidacy alight in June of 2015, almost 4 years ago, incredibly enough. And people have denounced that, including a lot of Republicans. The New York Times today has a story on caravans and illegal immigration. And the headline is, quote, "You have to pay with your body. The hidden nightmare of sexual violence on the border," by Manny Fernandez, McAllen, Texas. "It was dark in the stash house where they kept her, the windows covered so no one could see inside. At first, the smugglers had her cook for the other migrants who had recently crossed illegally into the United States. Then they took her to a room upstairs, locked the door, and began taking turns with her." This is the story of a 36-year-old mother of three from Guatemala who crossed the Rio Grande, was led to a so-called safe house in the Texas border city of McAllen, and then untold man after man after man after man had his evil way with her. The men she had paid to get her safely to the United States drugged her with pills and cocaine, refusing to let us out even to bathe. They raped us so many times, she said, they didn't see us as human beings anymore. This is the system that the Democrats have, in fact, incentivized, actually chosen to incentivize. And it's evil. And we have an insane situation here in this country now where essentially the progressives get to decide which laws shall be enforced and which shall not. Incidentally, and I say this as a Canadian, so you can take it for what it's worth, because we're the loyalists, as they say, on the northern shores of Lake Ontario, you guys had your revolution, and those of us who stayed loyal to George III all had to flee north and wind up in Canada, where it's cold. So that was an unfair deal anyway. If you were going to split the continent and force us into one half of it only, why did you have to give us the northern half? Because it's bloody cold up there. So anyway, we've got the... we're well aware that you excitable revolutionary types, one of the things you didn't like was that you would pass laws and then George III would hold off signing them, hold off giving royal assent to a bill becomes law when it receives royal assent. And George III was withholding royal assent because he didn't like some of the bills you were passing. He didn't like some of the laws, so he was sort of picking and choosing laws. Now we have progressives who pick and choose laws. So the same people, for example, who say that the immigration laws of America should be ignored with impunity, then immediately, if Trump tries to figure out a way to get the platform he ran on implemented, then they take him to court. So a judge is the most important guy in the world when he's striking down Trump actions. But at the same time, there's all this other immigration law that judges and everybody else are supposed to just ignore. So we live in a world that is not actually a land of law anymore, because when you have judges and legislators and administrative agencies and bureaucrats who get to pick which laws are implemented and which laws are not, then that is not a land of law. If you can pick and choose which laws on the books are valid and which aren't, that is no longer a land of law. And Trump actually is, it is interesting to me to see the New York Times belatedly catch up to the Trump position on all the rape and sex crime going on the border. You know what's interesting about this is that no one, Rush said this on Friday, no one in Washington wants the wall. Doesn't matter who you go to. Doesn't matter whether you talk to Democrats, to Republicans, to judges, to media. None of them want the wall because they don't see the woman in the safe house on the upper floor being raped and raped and raped and raped and raped and raped and raped some more. They don't see that. To them, the vast armies of the undocumented... Bernie Sanders has just hired a fine, upstanding member of the undocumented American community to be his campaign spokesman. So we used to talk about these guys living in the shadows. They're not living in the shadows anymore. They're up front. They're heroes. They're the dreamers. The dreamers. And the woman upstairs in the safe house in McAllen, Texas, being raped and raped and raped and raped and raped again by a system that Democrats and judges and the media incentivize is actually the reality of the dream. It's the nightmare that underpins the dream. It's the nightmare that underpins the dream. And it is disgraceful. And the lies that wealthy, successful, ruling class elites tell themselves about this is appalling. To them, these are just the people who serve you. Because we have less social mobility than we used to have now. So you have the cities are increasingly full of extremely wealthy people and extremely poor people. And the extremely wealthy people get used to being served, to being waited. They don't want to have to mow their own lawns. They don't want to have to clean their own bathrooms. And they have gotten used to the fact that there is this vast army of people who come and clean their houses and clean their swimming pools and maintain their tennis courts. They've got used to the fact that when you go around successful cities like Washington, D.C. and New York, everyone you encounter at the low level serving you in the service jobs in the course of a day is from somewhere else. If you go and stop and get a coffee, the people are from somewhere else. If you get in a cab, the driver is from somewhere else. They've got used to that. They don't see beyond the great glittering metropolis where the rich people have armies of the undocumented to serve them, the cultural transformation in towns that are not rich. They don't see the woman getting raped in the upstairs room in McAllen, Texas. They don't see, or they choose, more precisely, they choose not to see the evil that their reliance on that system encourages and facilitates. And so we see almost 4 years after Trump made his allegedly inflammatory statement when he came down the escalator at Trump Tower, that the New York Times have finally acknowledged the truth of the situation. You have to pay with your body the hidden nightmare of sexual violence on the border. That's what it is. That's what it is. The dreamers, the men upstairs raping this woman and raping armies of women who get beaten, women who get made pregnant, women who get forced into prostitution, women who, when they're not cooking or having sex that they're forced into, are shackled to beds, or if they happen to be in an exterior camp, are shackled to trees with duct tape, rope, handcuffs. This is the system that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and almost all the most powerful figures in the Democrat Party and half the Republican Party want to encourage. 1-800-282-2